It's very fair to say there's no way we're starting on March 4th, even though there hasn't been an official pronouncement of that change. When do you think that trial might happen? And are you starting to think that New York City and Alvin Bragg might actually get the first bite at the Trump prosecution apple?
Right. So this March 4th trial date, there's no conceivable way that it can move forward. And here's why it's on hold is as the courts are figuring out this presidential immunity issue. So this is the first time we know that a president, former president, has been criminally charged. And the courts need to sort this out. So this is on appeal. Judge Chutkin, who's overseeing the January 6th case in Washington, issued an order last month denying Donald Trump's presidential immunity claims. That then went to the appellate court. There was a hearing by a 3-judge panel on January 9th. We're waiting to get that decision. We're assuming it's a 3 Democrat judge panel. We're assuming that they're going to uphold Judge Chutkin's lower court ruling. But that eventually then has to get to the Supreme Court. They are going to have to determine if for the first time a former president, can be held criminally liable for his actions in office. So that's why this March 4th trial date is on hold. All of the pretrial calendar up until this point is on hold. And Judge Chutkin last week in a separate filing sort of suggested that this March 4th trial date was not going to happen and that she was going to make sure that all the time now that has been suspended leading up to this March 4th trial date, that would all be sort of backfilled once the presidential immunity issue is resolved. So this could push the trial into May, June, over the summer. And so to your point, does Alvin Bragg go first? And keep in mind, we still have the classified documents case in Southern Florida. That trial date is set for May 20th. Those pretrial deadlines also on hold pending the outcome of the DC trial. So we have all these things kind of in flux. But look, I'll tell you, Merrick Garland made it very clear in an interview last week that he will abide by no notions related to pursuing any kind of political prosecution or investigation before an election. He says that this is now in the hands of the judges. It's out of his hands. And so will Judge Chutkin move forward with the DC trial over the summer or even into the fall? I believe that she would.
So, I mean, Julie, I know there's so many moving pieces here, and I'm asking you to look into the crystal ball a little bit. But, right now, based on the timelines, the motions, the decisions that have come down thus far, how do you gauge which trials are likely to happen before the election and which aren't at this stage? You know what I mean? Of the 4 criminal trials, how would you each one assess that it's likely or not likely to actually happen before the general election, which we now know is going to be a Trump election?
So my guess would be the classified documents trial. Judge Aileen Cannon there has been very skeptical of Jack Smith and DOJ's handling of this case. She is the one that suspended a lot of the deadlines back in November. She was saying that there was no way the March 4th trial in DC would be finished in time to prepare for the May 20th trial date. There's going to be a hearing in her courtroom on March 1st, where we are going to get to watch Special Counsel Jack Smith's team, Jay Bratt, go to Judge Cannon and explain why that trial is on hold. So my guess is this classified documents case might never go to trial, especially if Donald Trump wins. She has been very skeptical, and now, I don't know, she won't push a May 20th trial date. They're not even close to being ready to take that to trial. So do they really want Alvin Bragg's case to be first out of these 4 criminal prosecutions? I doubt it. Fannie Willis, we know in Fulton County, is already in a lot of trouble, scandal enveloping her prosecution and the hiring of her lover, Nathan Wade. So my guess is still that if you had to bet that the DC trial with Judge Chutkin and this 4-count indictment by Jack Smith, that is still probably the most likely case to go to trial before the election.
And that would be wild, Julie, because as you just said, and as you're breaking down, I actually think they may not be able to start this till after July 4th because I think it's going to be hard to, depending on when the Supreme Court ruling comes down on, as you have mentioned, one half of the 4 charges that Jack Smith has brought so far could potentially be tossed out as not able to be prosecuted, right? So I think starting a trial with half of your charges potentially tossed before you even maybe finish the trial would be crazy. And that could mean, if I'm right, that we're talking about them trying to do a trial right in the middle of a legitimate presidential campaign, right? Even during the primary is ridiculous, but to do it in July and August leading into the 2024 election is beyond insane.
It is. And to your point, just to clarify what you're talking about, because this is really important and this could impact Jack Smith's case in DC more than the presidential immunity issue. And that is the Supreme Court reviewing the DOJ's application of 1512C2 obstruction of an official proceeding. This is the felony that's been slapped against more than 300 January 6 defendants, but also represents 2 of the 4 counts in Jack Smith's J6 2020 election criminal indictment. The Supreme Court has already granted cert in that. We're expecting oral arguments in March or April, and we should get a good sense, Clay, by the time when we're hearing how the Supreme Court is handling this, whether they are poised to overturn how DOJ has intentionally misinterpreted this post-Enron evidence tampering statute to criminalize political dissent. So we already know that 4 justices agreed to grant cert in this case, meaning they want to review what the appellate court did, which was basically uphold how DOJ has been using it. But if they do reverse the appellate court and say that DOJ has not properly interpreted either the spirit, the letter, the language of this law, that will be devastating to Jack Smith's case and really the heart of the Department of Justice's ongoing January 6th criminal prosecution. So that's a big one to watch. So that just kind of adds to all these moving parts and influx. So then what does Jack Smith do? If he is picking up signals from the Supreme Court that they are going to reverse how DOJ is using obstruction of an official proceeding, will he move forward a DC trial with 2 other really vague counts? Conspiracy to defraud the United States and conspiracy to deny the rights of individuals. I mean, that's even fuzzier than the obstruction count. Will he bring an additional indictment, or will he just take his losses and try to put all of his eggs in the classified documents case? I doubt that too, because he does not have a friendly judge in Judge Aileen Cannon in Southern Florida, quite the opposite of what he's dealing with in Washington. So we'll see what the Supreme Court does. That'll be a big signal.
Julie, just one more thing. You've had a lot of contact with January 6 defendants and their families. Do you have any sense from, I mean, now that it looks like Trump is the Republican nominee, I'm just wondering if you can give us a little bit of, are some of these individuals who have been handed extremely severe prison sentences, are they already thinking, I might have my freedom back in 1 year if Donald Trump wins? I mean, does that come up at all? Do you hear that from the families?
It does. I mean, they are very hopeful, and that's why you see a lot of January 6 defendants and their families backing Donald Trump, because they really believe he is their only hope for exoneration. And I will tell you, on the 1512 count, you already have judges who are delaying sentences. And in some cases, defense attorneys are coming back and asking for release of their defendants on a conviction or plea for 1512. So it's already having an impact. But yes, they are very hopeful. They believe their only chance of freedom, exoneration, clearing their name, and getting the truth about January 6th is if Donald Trump is elected in November.
Speaking of that truth about January 6th, you put out the story about the possibility of these videos or these documents being wiped clean, and they're trying on the January 6th committee to keep them from being recovered. What do you know about that story, and what is the impact?
It's just another example of Betty Thompson and Nancy Pelosi's January 6th Select Committee destroying and concealing evidence, not just from the public, but from House Republicans who are entitled to all of the evidence. 4 terabytes, we're told, of evidence produced and collected by this committee. So this was just the latest revelation from Representative Barry Loudermilk, who is basically investigating the January 6th Select Committee and trying to collect all of this evidence, which we already know has not just been buried and destroyed by Benny Thompson, but some key transcripts are now buried at the Joe Biden White House. And those relate to Secret Service records, transcripts with Secret Service agents, and we still can't get our eyes on that either. This also, speaking of obstruction of an official proceeding, this also represents hiding potentially exculpatory evidence from January 6th defendants, including Donald Trump, by this investigation, depositions that were taken under oath, evidence that they solely collected, this committee, that could be used potentially as exculpatory evidence in ongoing criminal procedures. This is a crime in and of itself.
Julie Kelly, everybody. Declassified with Julie Kelly is her Substack if you want to be really up to speed week to week on what's going on with all things J6, the fight that Trump has for his legal rights, and, of course, the 2024 election. Julie, thanks so much for being with us. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys.